Good afternoon to the second session. So I'm glad that you're again with us. Um, to start the session, I just wanted to show you the outcome of an exercise we did yesterday with the consortium. Yesterday we had a consortium meeting, and it was looking backwards. We had a project of 2 years, 1 year, 2 years. And then you see the smileys and you see the unhappy people. And then we asked the consortium partners, what is your experience of the last 2 years in our project? And then the people had some post-its to put it on the wall. And here you see the outcome of, and I don't expect you to read everything on the post-its because I just wanted to say a couple of big understandings, and this is maybe the major point is on the left down corner. I love bringing people together to learn. So this is also the reason why I'm here and why I'm coordinating this project. It means that I love working with people, and I love doing the network because I'm so curious about what you know more than I do. And if we can share knowledge together, that is what is the final aim of this kind of project activities. Maybe I will just also pick up 2 red post-its because this was maybe very well expressed, and a little bit more to the left, it was slow burn starts towards the EURAKNOS fire, and that was the case also with this project. So we started and then suddenly it becomes into fire, because if you look on the right hand upper corner, you see in red, we feel that we get the recognition of our projects or for our projects. So it means that's also the reason why we are all here. Why we are all here. It means that it means in one or another way you heard about us and you said, okay, let's come on board and then let's have a look what they did. So welcome. Now, in fact, to introduce this session in the afternoon, so we aim to talk about we aim to talk to project collaborators and so on. So it means that if we look now backwards, I think with the project we have a good view on what is done today in European project work. And if we want to move further and regarding that platform and storage of data, I believe that we do have 3 options. The option number 1 is working further as we do today. It means that some projects are working for a couple of years, for up to 4 years, and they have a nice website, and there is an IT manager who puts the information on the website, and this way they are communicating and disseminating about what exactly the project does. And at the end of the project is finished. The objects and the data and the knowledge is there, but then maybe they have funding to keep it open for a couple of years, and then the website is closed and the information is lost. That's option number 1. The option number 2 is we do have, and we found some projects thinking more in depth regarding the knowledge deposition. So they started to build a platform themselves. So the IT expert is talking about the data, is talking about the metadata, is talking about the FAIR principles. So how to store it in the long term, how to keep it available. And the IT expert is making some choices. So these choices are done on his past experience, and maybe he chooses certain software or whatever. And then at the end of the project stops, the platform is there. But then, of course, you need to find another project to take over that platform. And what is really problematic, if you ask me, is that if it's taken over by another project, then the IT expert will say, oh, but that was old stuff that he used. Oh, the program is not well, and I will have to restart everything from zero. So this is the second option. So that means that from time to time, the project on itself, it goes in a certain direction, but maybe there are other directions also you can take. And then you have option number 3, and that is the EURAKNOS, and in fact also the EUREKA project. So it means that we looked at all the types of platforms that are now used today. We had discussion with the European Commission, with the Digit division over there, and we asked, okay, which type of background should we build the platform on? And we believe that we have turned in a certain direction that it can be sustainable in the long term. So this is in fact what we have done, and that what will also be presented by the people talking in this afternoon. So instead of having each project starting again from zero, I would just invite all of you that you say, okay, let's build upon EURAKNOS, EUREKA, let's broaden it, let's use it, and please do not repeat work. It is there, so I would say let's make use of it. This afternoon we will have 3 different topics which will be presented, and then we also will have again an interactive session. Those 3 topics, first we will have Laura saying a little bit more about some useful abstracts or practice abstracts, some useful outputs of the project, so she will present something. Then we will have Maxime taking again the word about the TN Explorer's Guide, so the Thematic Networks Explorer's Guide. He will also show how you can use it. And then the third point is, of course, it's again the platform itself. So Hercules and Lawrence will detail a little bit more about the metadata and the data and how you have to put them in the right format, or how do you have to at least foresee the necessary information so we can store them in a central deposit. So I would say, Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter. So just whilst I talk, I've got a quick video that I took of our website. So we've got our homepage at euraknos.eu with some key links at the top there, including our vision paper, policy brief, and obviously to EUREKA, which is our sister project, our mission statement to facilitate, collect knowledge, and about our thematic networks and our partners, and also the events going on, the newsletter, and featured videos and podcasts as well, and some nice testimonials from people who have been involved in workshops and our other work with thematic networks to develop our recommendations throughout the project. So in the deliverables section, this is where you can find all of our resources. So the Explorer's Guide, which Maxime will be talking about a bit later in a range of different languages, the platform, so the policy brief is there, the vision paper, and also some of the more technical guidelines in deliverable forms as prepared by our team working on that. Variety of EURAKNOS podcasts, and these have been conducted throughout the project to talk about different EURAKNOS outputs, but also sharing insights from the various thematic networks that we've been in touch with. And then we've also got our learnings from the thematic network, so some slightly more summarized reports that have informed the Explorer's Guide, and things like practice abstracts and things like that. So that's a very whistle-stop tour of what we've got. And below the TN learnings, there is also an About EURAKNOS section, which is where you can find recordings of the webinars that have taken place on the 5th of February. And once we've prepared the recordings from this event, then we will put those on that bottom section as well. And we will send a notification about that on Eventbrite. So next, hand over to Maxime for the Explorer's Guide.
Thank you, Laura. I hope I will be able to move the slide, but if not the case, I will ask you to do for me, please. So welcome again for the participants who were present this morning, and welcome to the new participant. So now I would like to present and to introduce one of the main inputs from the EURAKNOS project. It is the Explorer's Guide for Thematic Network. So now you will let's move for an overview of what is this guide, for what and for who. The objective is also to demonstrate and to promote the Explorer's Guide to as wide an audience as possible, and saying it is there to use. So now I will give you a general overview of the Explorer's Guide. What are the purpose, which are the target groups, and which are the main contents of this guide. And after that, I will present you, will give you a focus on the multi-actor approach. You will see together it's a real added value. And I would like also to show you some very practical using of this guide. Okay, so about this guide is for what and for whom. The purpose of this guide is this guide represent key insight from the community of practice written for a particular use by future coordinators and consortium members of thematic network to maximize their function and impact. So this guide brings together the knowledge and experience of thematic network practitioners, as well as good practices from thematic network project for you to explore and to be inspired by. The aim of this guide is to act as a sounding board to facilitate your thematic network to achieve its highest impact. About the target group, the main question is this guide is for you? If you are currently part of or managing a thematic network or multi-actor project, starting or planning to write a project proposal, then this guide is for you. If you are working for the European Union as a project officer or evaluating a thematic network or multi-actor project, then this guide might also be for you. And if you are interested in the multi-actor approach and looking for inspiration to design a project or improve end user engagement, then this guide might also be for you. If none of the above applies to you, but you are interested in thematic network, you are also very welcome to use our Explorer's Guide. The question now is how to use this guide. In this guide, you will find two different kind of boxes. The first one is good practices boxes. And these boxes direct you to good practice or tools from across the thematic network community as examples of how the Explorer's Guide principles have been applied in practice. We cannot include all detail, but provide the main insight from this thematic network community. And the second kind of boxes is some explanation boxes. And these boxes provide a more detailed account of an Explorer's Guide process, including the value behind the recommendation. And the tip I would like to share with you, it's very useful to get and to use the digital version because in this version you can click on all the links. All the links are hyperlinks, and so you can go directly to the right resources available on different websites. Now I would like to introduce you the main section of this guide. The first one is for the introduction. The second one is to present the multi-actor approach. In general, this guide is deliberately not written as technical how-to guidelines for implementing a thematic network, because a thematic network operates in a complex environment. It is therefore not appropriate to provide a simple blueprint solution. Section 3 is related to working effectively as a multi-actor approach. Section 4 is related to the project execution. At the end, section 5 is related to measuring your impact and thematic network sustainability. So now you will focus more on the multi-actor approach. So in this section of the guide, you try to deal with a lot of main questions, very important to get in mind to drive your thematic network. So this question are, what is the multi-actor approach in a thematic network? So in the guide, you try to give some guidelines about this question. Another question is how to choose the right teams to get started. Another one is, who are the main agricultural knowledge and innovation system actors to involve in my network? So it's very some key question. It's really important to keep in mind to build such a project. It's also how to identify the right combination of thematic network partners for the themes we want to address. What is the right size of my thematic network? How do you design your thematic network user engagement to optimize knowledge exchange? It's also some very key question. And the end, how do you develop your dissemination exploitation plan? And in the section 3 related to working effectively as a multi-actor network, we have also think about a lot of questions, how the consortium or partners are thinking when they are working in this kind of project. And this main question are presenting in this slide, but if you read more in depth the guide, you will have some answer to and some guidelines and some recommendation to get very effectively a multi-actor approach. Yeah. And now I would like to present a very practical use of this guide for a very practical example. It will be very useful to respond to calls for the new program of Horizon Europe project. If you can, if you have a quick look on this, for next years, we have 3 main topics directly linked to the Explorer's Guide. For example, the first one is called Broaden EIP operational groups outcomes across borders by means of the thematic networks, compiling and sharing knowledge ready for practice. And I'm sure if you have to think of a new project related to these topics, our Explorer's Guide will be very useful to get the good guidelines to do that. And now also something very practical. How do you get this guide? So this guide will be very soon available in 13 European languages. So now, for now, it's available in 6 languages: English, Dutch, French, German, Greek, and Spanish. In the coming weeks, it will also available in 7 other more other languages: Hungarian, Danish, Lithuanian, Estonian, Slovenian, Romanian, and Italian. So if you want to get, and I encourage to get it, you have 2 possibilities. The first one, you can have access to a digital version directly on our EURAKNOS website. You can download it as you want. And the second option, you can ask for a handbook, and for that you have to ask to the partner of your country who is involved in EURAKNOS, and it will be very helpful, and you can send this book. So thank you very much for your attention. If you wish to know more about the Explorer's Guide, do not hesitate to contact me, and I will send all the information you need. Thank you.
Thanks, Maxime. So before I hand over to Lawrence, we will play this video which introduces why we came up with the concept of the platform and the challenges that we're trying to help you to address.
Building a digital knowledge database to collect the outputs of multiple thematic networks might look easy at first sight. So many projects already have one, right? The reality is quite complicated. Each thematic network created their database independently, so combining these different systems is challenging. You might compare it to making one big puzzle out of several other puzzles. The viewer should be able to quickly and easily figure out what's being shown in the big picture. It has to be user-friendly. In EURAKNOS, we had to figure out how to integrate all of this information in its various forms and formats into one database. We had to build a blueprint to help us structure the data clearly and logically. We then had to extract the data from the source databases and integrate it into our destination database. To avoid manually copy-pasting all content from one database to the new one, we developed a web crawler, which worked together with our blueprint to populate our database with resources. On top of those technical challenges, we found out that even if you import the data, you can't always share it due to intellectual property rights. We had to make sure the correct permissions were in place. But what about the interface that visitors will use to access the data? People have gotten used to high standards set by big players in social media and online shopping to make surfing on the web as easy as possible. To meet the expectations of our visitors, professional digital designers collected feedback through user tests with potential visitors to make the interface as user-friendly as possible. This isn't a one-time investment. Visitor expectations constantly change, and interfaces are subjective to trends, so the interface needs frequent updates. This and other critical issues relating to the sustainability of the database need to be kept in mind. Creating a digital knowledge database is not easy, but the EURAKNOS project is creating an integrated, sustainable database for thematic networks so they don't have to.
Right, so over to you, Lawrence.
Thank you. So I'm briefly going to share the platform again, but only touch upon it briefly and show mainly why it could be interesting for thematic networks. So when you have basically your knowledge and you want your end user to be able to look for it, you have two ways. So first, you will be able to use the search function, but you also have the possibility to basically go to categories. So we have, for instance, categories which are more sector related, forestry, crop farming, livestock, but also cross-sectoral themes such as environment, society, and economics. So if your end user basically comes to the platform and has a very specific search function in like search query in mind, they can go there. They can basically see the results. They can see them basically in a list view, but also in a tile view if they want to. They can use the filter options with regard to the categories that are presented, but also with regard to subcategories, which we will be elaborating on throughout the EUREKA project. They can select basically on media type, on language, and when it was published. Now, one of the things which is very important here is the language element, because when the user basically arrives on the platform, they have to select the language, which means that everything that they will get presented afterwards, so for instance, the titles, the descriptions, those will be in the language of the platform that has been selected. Now, this is one of the things that is going to be an issue that we're going to discuss as well. But so this is one way to basically access the data. Let's say that your user is basically around to explore a bit, then they can go within really a specific category, and there they can find out, for instance, the different kind of articles that are available. So if they are interested in a specific video, they go to the video page and they can immediately see, for instance, how many likes there are. This is also important to you as a thematic network to see how engaged the users are with the topic, with the article, the output that you've basically created, but also with regard to the comments. So this is going to be a very interesting element with regard to the platform, because there's going to be discussion with regard to the article or the video that you have uploaded on the platform. What is also going to be very interesting for you is that when you're an author, you will have an author space. So this is where you can basically have a brief description of yourself. If you want, there are the contact details so that users can basically contact you a bit more easily if they have specific questions. But also, for instance, the thematic network or the association that is linked to this output is going to be going to have a small space on the platform so that they know from which framework the knowledge originated. Very important, as I mentioned before, was the fact that you will be able to leave comments and have discussions based on the content. So, but only after signing up and logging in. So your content will always be like, if you give permission and you upload it on the platform, it will always be visible for the end user without having to log in or sign up. The comments will also be able to be visible, but they will not be able to comment without signing up or logging in. So it is not possible that your content gets trashed with specific comments by somebody who's unknown. You will also see, for instance, that there are people who will have badges. Those are the people who have uploaded content onto the platform. And those are people who we consider experts. And very important as well is that there is then also related content. This can be content related specifically to the thematic network, to the topic. That is very important. So you can also, again, go there, and then, for instance, here you might see that this is, for instance, maybe for a practice abstract, something very interesting. But you might also be able to go and see for a podcast. You then get a small description of the podcast in your own in the language that you've selected. But then, for instance, listening to the podcast, that will be in the original language. So this is where you already see that language has a bit of an issue. Now, one of the things that we wanted to show as well is that if, for instance, the comment section hasn't really been able to provide an answer, or the content that has been provided here hasn't been able to provide you with an answer, then there is the community section. Very interesting for thematic networks as well to go and explore this, because here there might be questions related to topics that might need further investigation and could be the source for potentially new thematic networks. And then there will also be the list of experts with regard to a specific category where you can go through and they can find you more easily. Now, I want to end my overview with regard to the platform and go into the discussion with my colleague Hercules, because we did a certain exercise. We basically took a fact sheet, and a very nicely done fact sheet, and we implemented it into the platform. And we noticed actually that you really have to do quite a bit of layout and quite a bit of work to get it to look quite presentable with regards to how it is presented in the platform and how it originally looks. Now, this is something that takes quite a bit of work for data annotation, and that might not be very feasible. So one of the things that could be more feasible is, in essence, that you basically have the title and you have a specific description that you provide in the language, and then you Then you provide basically a PDF viewer which displays the PDF in the original language or in the language which is most common, so that the user can basically download it, potentially use new translating technology to translate the PDF. But this is where you already notice that language is going to be an important thing, but also the way that you enter the data into the platform. And on this note, I would like to hand the word over to my colleague Hercules to discuss some other issues that we've encountered.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Good afternoon from me as well. I don't know, Laura, is it possible to have co-host rights to share my screen? Perfect. Good afternoon from me as well. My name is Hercules. I'm working as a research associate at the Agricultural University of Athens, which is a core partner in EURAKNOS. And I would like to add to this conversation because Lawrence has presented to you what is actually visible. From my point of view, I would like to steer your attention to what is not visible with regard to our platform, because there are so many things to discuss about the functionalities, all these nice features, and the very user-friendly interfaces that our platform is intended to have. But in order to deliver all these features, we need to have actual content stored into our repository. And this is where the big challenge comes from. We have to consider data, knowledge objects, as we sometimes refer to them in our project, from various sources. And of course, we have to deal not only content from various sources, but also very divergent types or kinds of content, like videos, presentations, documents, infographics, podcasts. And on top of that, we also need to consider that each of the data repositories that need to be considered as content sources for our effort may have adopted a completely different way to model their data, which poses an additional issue on top of all the issues I have just referred to. And as I told you earlier, there are very different types of content. There are very different categories of content, but we may also refer to the issue of having many different types into each category. So, for example, one major format in which content comes and becomes available are documents. But when it comes to documents, we have so many different types of documents to deal with, and some of them are presented in this slide. And we should never forget that there is also a requirement to comply with existing recommendations and frameworks. One such widely adopted and frequently cited recommendation are the FAIR principles. They are referred to many times, but there are so many issues to be considered when saying that an effort is compatible to the FAIR principles. And of course, so many technology solutions to select from. So this is an overview of all the challenges that we had to, consider at the technical level. But there are also some very considerable challenges at not a technical level, but other levels. And such a challenge relates to intellectual property rights, which is an issue that has not been considered to an adequate extent till now from past efforts. Given the research we have done with regard to thematic networks, we have only managed to come across one thematic network case, the Smartakis thematic network case, in the context of which data is indeed made available under a very specific licensing scheme, which you can see in this slide. Of course, this leaves much room to investigate for us, and not only in the context of EURAKNOS, but also in the context of the follow-up project, which is EUREKA. So all these were the challenges that we had to face, either on the technical level or not. So how we tried to go around all these challenges? First of all, we tried to provide a robust design, a robust conceptual design that would allow us to have a consistent way to describe all knowledge objects in our repository, no matter where they come from, no matter what their category or type is. Of course, another issue of our concern has been the accessibility and findability of the data available through our repository, and of course, the supply of data that is relevant to the user, and all this under the hood of making use of state-of-the-art technologies. So in order to start with a robust conceptual design, we came across a data model for our repository, which we consider to be a very important contribution, because we have been able to describe all this wealth of knowledge objects by using this specific model, which has allowed us to define a set of metadata for the definition, for the description of our knowledge objects. So after having done our conceptual modeling exercise, the next part of work that we implemented from summer and on was to start refining and cleaning the bulk of data that has been made available from thematic networks, to select those data or knowledge objects that could be considered as useful to the end user, those data objects that could be considered of having a high impact. And then we proceeded to a process of annotating all these knowledge objects with metadata, which required some instructional material to be created for people who undertook this obligation, and of course to upload all this data into our repository and make it available through our platform. It was not, Lawrence, a practice abstract, it was a fact sheet, the example you presented. So the fact sheet and the possible ways it could be delivered to the user is just one very specific example of a knowledge object out of the hundreds of knowledge objects that are currently integrated into our repository. So I hope I did not tire you with many details, but I tried to very quickly provide you in a nutshell some issues that we had to come across and solve when populating our repository with content. Let me stop sharing my screen with you.
Hercules, in the chat, there's a comment from Maria Jose Amaral.
Yes.
She would like to raise the issue of GDPR and maybe explain a little bit about it. So I would like to offer you, Maria Jose, to open your microphone and say something. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilse. No, it's just because I raised it in the morning, but I'm not sure at the time it was fully understood, and maybe it was more concrete to raise it in this session now. Because my concerns with the GDPR, of course, on the platform that you are developing and for the future, you have to comply with all the rules. I'm thinking more about any GDPR issues, likewise as the intellectual property rights issues with the data objects that were collected or developed in other projects. And the fact that when these projects have made videos or have made interviews, the consent that was provided was for a specific use. So you also need to be attentive that you can indeed make the names of the persons available in your platform. So this morning, I think it's in one of the examples that Laurence showed, there was the names of the contributors from Smart AKIS, this type of thing. So it's a bit of thinking in this perspective that when you are reusing information and data that has been collected by others, and if there is personal data, you need to also keep in mind what was the initial consent that was provided. And that's it. I don't expect an answer now. I just wanted to make sure that you were also aware of this concern.
Thank you so very much for this comment. This is indeed a huge issue, and we intend to provide some initial recommendations about how we are thinking to, tackle this issue in EURAKNOS, and of course there will be a follow-up in EUREKA as well. From my point of view, I can add to this conversation by saying that given the fact that previous projects have not, let's say, explicitly addressed the issues of intellectual property rights by attaching, let's say, a specific license to their knowledge objects, our suggestion is to make those knowledge objects available under a specific license ourselves, which will, let's say, protect or specifically define the ways in which these knowledge objects could become useful to the community. Of course, when it comes to knowledge objects like videos where people are shown or other types of knowledge objects where some personal details may be provided, then there needs to be a clearer framework under which these knowledge objects need to be made available to the community. I guess, of course, Lawrence, Peter, and the other partners in our project could add to this. I think that with our work, we need to start paving the way towards the way in which the property rights of the work undertaken in thematic networks and other projects should be taken into consideration. There are many different frameworks and schemes for licensing. And of course, I guess I'm pretty sure that such schemes could be of use to future thematic networks or multi-actor projects. Just one question I can see about whether our technology choices have been based on open standards. My response will be absolutely. Because this is a requirement coming from the proposal and the grant agreement itself.
Thank you, Hercules. Laura, do you want to move on to EUREKA?
Yeah, so just a very quick follow on. Obviously, EUREKA is building on the EURAKNOS findings and further developing the platform. So a lot of these questions and inputs that we're having from you today can be taken on and made use of in the EUREKA project. So I do have a very short snippet of a video.
The EUREKA project is working to develop an online knowledge reservoir of the key outputs from Horizon 2020 projects, which have been run across the EU by farming and forestry practitioners like Jack, in partnership with scientists and other experts to tackle real-life, practical problems across Europe. To find out more, please visit our website or follow us on social media.
So that was just a very quick mention of EUREKA and a reminder to, if you are interested in the EURAKNOS outputs, definitely do follow EUREKA. And I don't know whether Peter or anyone else wants to add anything on that project. But if not, then we can launch into the questions and answer session. So you will all get plenty of opportunity to ask your questions. Hadi Tam, will you give suggestions on how these different types should look like, the requirements, and how people could learn if performing good enough?
And I would like to thank Hardy for the question. It's indeed very interesting because it reflects some of the issues we had when, let's say, shortlisting, if I could say so, the content to integrate into our repository. Because we had, as I told you, a bulk of content to choose from, but not all content could be considered as clean enough or relevant. And in addition to that, we also tried to, let's say, categorize it in a further way. As I told you earlier, from a technical perspective, we are distinguishing content in the format it becomes available. So, for example, a very broad category of content are documents, but it would not be helpful to just deliver documents and provide our users with the option to just search for documents, for example. It would be more helpful to allow them to search for practice abstracts, to search for fact sheets, to search for technical articles and types of documents like those. So when things came to identifying which types of documents are which, I need to tell you that we had a very hard time because the way in which those documents were named was not the same. And you can easily imagine that it was not feasible to read through all the documents available because we are talking about some tens of thousands of documents. So we were trying to do an initial categorization by checking what is in the title. So a first, let's say, recommendation that we could provide, the first suggestion on how to improve all those different types of content would be to have a clearer way of naming documents and other categories of content. However, this requires a common typology of knowledge objects to be used, which is also something tricky and challenging. This is something that we have done and that we propose in our model. This is why we firmly believe that our data model and our design attempts to make a start with regard to, let's say, a precise way of describing things when it comes to the outputs of thematic networks. So one first suggestion to sum up would be to have a consistent way to name files and probably specifically mention in the file name what the type of the output is, for example, practice abstract, fact sheet, in order to help people better understand what the output is about only by its name.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Hercules. And to follow up, I think there's a couple of comments, questions to follow up that up. So Hardy continues, if I'm willing to contribute, it would be helpful if I fill forms in an expected way. We as people have very different ways of language and thinking barriers. Therefore, suggestions or requirements would be reasonable. And related to that, Annie says, will there be some guidelines provided about how to deliver content to the website, or would it be possible to upload content by ourselves, like in a forum?
Yes, this is something that we indeed consider as a follow-up to EURAKNOS. I mean, we certainly consider this option in the follow-up project. So having, based on the fact that we intend to provide such a feature, I mean, to allow users to upload content themselves, the guidelines and the prompts used there will be crystal clear in order to help people provide content the right way.
Thank you, Hercules. And then a bit further up in the chat, we have a question from Stephen. Have the technology choices been based on open standards?
Yes, we refer to that. Yes, indeed, we have done so. We have not used, let's say, any proprietary technology. All software frameworks are open source, widely adopted in the community. So, and they have been chosen with the aim to also contribute to the scalability aspect of this endeavor, because as our repository and platform will grow bigger, we need technologies that will be able to accommodate, the larger number of content that will come into as time passes.
We've just had a comment from Brinks. What could be the reason not to accept content or output from TNs?
Lawrence, should I start? And then probably there are some issues that have been raised by Lawrence as well, mostly relating to the layout of the content, but I would not say that there could be any reasons for not accepting content or output from a thematic network. The only issue that we will have to deal with will be to, let's say, fine-tune things in order to collect all the information necessary in order to integrate this content into our repository. Because, as I told you in my presentation, each thematic network, this is what we have figured out, adopts a tailor-made solution, which means that it uses its own data model, its own metadata. We do not say that our list of metadata is the best one ever, but it's a first step towards a uniform description of all kinds of knowledge objects. So the thing that we need to deal with is to ensure that we will be able to have content from any thematic network in our repository, together with all the information necessary to integrate it there.
What I would like to add to that is that it's not indeed, as Hercules says, about accepting or rejecting data from thematic networks. It's going to be about how accessible it's going to be to the end user. So we can provide it in a PDF viewer, or we can provide an image or things like that. But if you have, for instance, an infograph, which is an image and it's not translatable, then it's not really accessible to the end user if they do not speak that language. So this is really going to be something that is very important as well with regard to how thematic networks are going to communicate their output to us. Is this going to be something that they want to invest time in, that it becomes accessible to end users in a sustainable way? Or are they happy with it just being presented in the original form? And then, yes, it is sustainable. Maybe in the future, there will be a way technologically, and I'm quite guaranteed that there will be a way to automatically start translating PDFs and keeping the layout standardized, etc. But we don't know how far ahead in time that it will be. And so we don't know how easily accessible that data will be at that point. So it is something that the thematic networks really will need to pay attention to.
Thanks, Hercules and Lawrence. We've also got a couple of more comments related to what can be included in the database. So Maria Jose says, what about outputs such as databases and apps? And related to that, Brinks again comments, in Best for Soil, we developed a DSS tool based on a database. Could this be integrated in the platform or through a link to the database as it is maintained somewhere else?
Very important issues, both of them. I don't know whether you were able to notice it in one of the slides I showed you, because I skipped through that slide quite quickly. So one of the let's say content categories, one of the categories of knowledge objects that could become available from a thematic network or another type of object is software. So there are two options here. In the case that we are talking about software that has an executable file, I mean those files that you click on them and then the software gets installed into your computer, we could have the executable file itself stored into our repository, and people willing to use that software could download the executable file, store it into their computer, and install the software into their personal computer. In the case of systems or applications like whole databases, then in that case, there could be the link to the database. But this is also an ongoing discussion in the follow-up project of EURAKNOS as well. If the database ceases to exist, then the link will lead nowhere. So this is why our intention is to create a centralized repository. Of course, we can easily understand that it's not easy to store a whole database into another database like ours. And in order to respond to a comment/question that Ilse posted, there is indeed a metadata property in our model named as license, which has been placed there with the aim to provide as a value the specific licensing scheme under which each concrete knowledge object will become available. There is no property about GDPR, but GDPR is a larger issue, so this relates to the whole policy we adopt about protecting personal data, which is of course something under consideration. And the validity of content is crucial indeed. In the case of uploading content from, let's say, already existing repositories, because this is what we have done in EURAKNOS so far. We have used content that already exists. So this validation has been done by our side. In the future, this validation could be done by the person who uploads content And in the follow-up project of EURAKNOS, there is also an ongoing discussion about using some kind of a tool to do some part of this validation. But these are still issues to further investigate, so no conclusive, no decisions have yet been made about those.
Maybe to briefly add upon that. So the short answer to the question of is the quality of the data good enough to enter into the platform? If it comes out of a Horizon 2020 project, it should be good enough. But we also add the layer on top of it of the content that can be discussed by end users as well. So end users can upvote and downvote content. That is, of course, something that we will need to follow up on, whether that is a self-sustaining system that works well. We've there, for that reason, taken more the form of Reddit and Quora and Stack Exchange, where this system does seem to work well, but it is always going to be something to explore with and see how this turns out.
Lawrence, and may I add something to that, because this validity conversation appears to be quite interesting. Our intention is not to judge the content of an output. I mean, we are not in the position to say that, for example, practice A that is presented in one document is better than practice B, but I will refer to a much simpler but indicative problem. Let's say that we have developed a user interface that I can use and upload content into the repository. What would be the case if I uploaded a document about football? It would be completely irrelevant. So we are talking about basic kind of validation. And the validation we did when integrating content into the repository was, for example, to check whether a document is corrupted or not, because try to imagine what are the issues in terms of quality when trying to view a PDF document that appears to exist, but you cannot read anything because there is some kind of an issue relating to the encoding of text, which means that the text is not displayed properly. So we are talking about basic issues relating to validation, and not to judge whether something related to a practice or something else is better than something other. I guess that this is where the comments and the feedback from users comes into play, which also provides some kind of a usefulness check to the community.
Yeah, and absolutely those user tests happening in EUREKA very soon. So with that, then we can hand over to Peter to sum up the session, because we've only got 5 minutes left.
Thank you all for a nice presentation this afternoon. So I will repeat a bit what we just have seen. So first of all, sometimes when people may look at the website, the EURAKNOS website is constructed at the start of the project. So it means at that time some insights may have been different compared to today. Yesterday during the consortium meeting, we also, there was also someone who said if we had to do it again, it would look a little bit different. So it's an example. So don't say and think, oh, we have to copy paste the EURAKNOS website. If you do so, okay, that's nice. It shows that we have some impact, but it's not that we say this is the way forward. It's just one of the examples. We think that we helped you, and maybe we will overload the European Commission now with a lot of proposals for thematic networks, because we encouraged you to write a new proposal and so on. So we also have given you the guidelines how to do it and how to improve it according to what we believe, because we have selected the best of the thematic networks. And that they are all summarized in the booklet, so you can order it, you can download it, the booklet, as you want. This has been explained by Maxim. And then Laura and Laurens and Hercules explained us about the platform. Again, they jumped a little bit more into detail compared to this morning. And we had, in fact, a good discussion regarding the data objects. And I will remember the remark of the GDPR. So In fact, I believe it's a message for our project, but I believe it's also a message for all people working on thematic networks today, and in fact working on in general on projects, that in fact, if you have, or if you make these materials, I will maybe make it simple. So you need to ask permission for an endless time of the person who had said, okay, I will contribute to that material. So it means that you need his informed consent into eternity, so until the end of times, because normally we have this kind of GDPR where you say, okay, it will be for the project just only 5 years. After the project, it will be stored for another 5 years, and then it will be deleted. So in this case, if you put it on the platform, then you will, or then I believe that it will stay there for the coming 20, 30, 50 years. So this is what we at least aim. And another point is, of course, that if you talk about data objects, they have to be, you should be aware that they cross the borders. So you will have national laws and things like that also. I just want to put it on the table because I'm grateful to Marie-José that she also clarified a little bit that point. This is maybe, I close the day with giving some of you as a coordinator a headache of, oh, should I have a look at that also? No, I believe it's better that we share the problems together and we say, okay, I solved it in that way, or I have a person that has the expertise who solved it in one or another way, so that we can maybe also think about a common format, how we put our data objects on the website when knowing that they will be consulted by a lot of people and so on, and that it may stay much longer than the project takes. So we will meet each other in, yes, now it's 40 minutes for the last session of our final conference. Some of you may join, some of you will not, and then I wish those people having a nice afternoon and a good weekend, and stay in touch, and please follow us and don't hesitate to contact us.